Jared Goff and the Lions beat up on the Raiders 26-14 on Monday Night Football. Goff, far better numbers than Jimmy G. Garoppolo, no completions to wide receivers in the first half, and one of his wide receivers is Davante Adams. Davante Adams finished with just one catch for 11 yards. We get more reaction now from our NFL reporter, Dave Naylor, who's all over America this week. Dave, you talked about Jahmyr Gibbs in your pregame hit. You know, it was a controversial first-round pick in a lot of ways, Dave, but boy, did he ever show off his versatility on Monday night. Now it seems like the Lions have that secondary target they wanted to have along with Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yeah, it was. I mean, you go back to draft night in April, there was some incredulous reaction to the Detroit Lions spending the number 12 pick overall on a running back. A lot of the thinking in today's NFL is you don't do that. They had already signed David Montgomery to a 3-year, $18 million contract through free agency. Why did they need Jahmyr Gibbs? But one of the things about Jahmyr Gibbs, and we saw it tonight, he's a very adept receiver as well. Like in college, you know, he had 2,100 yards rushing in his college career. He had 1,200 yards receiving. So he arrived in the NFL as a guy who had both skill sets. And I can remember when I was at Lions camp this summer, Jay, I asked Dan Campbell, the head coach, what was the trait that you value most in a running back? And he deadpanned right back, versatility. And you saw that tonight. And look, they established him right from the start of the game. Of the first 9 snaps on the opening drive that the Lions had that eventually ended in a field goal, 7 of the touches went to Jahmyr Gibbs. And we saw him kind of explode statistically last week at garbage time against the Ravens once that game was out of hand with Montgomery not in the game and with Montgomery here not again this week, nursing a rib injury. I mean, it was, can he do it when it's more meaningful football? And I think we saw the answer to that. Certainly his presence felt right from start to finish tonight. He was the most important player on the field for the Detroit Lions.
And then, Dave, on the other side of the football for the Lions, the Detroit defense holds Jimmy G to about 126 yards. They sack him 6 times. And we know how it went against the Ravens last week. It was not good. Was this the perfect offense for Detroit to play for a bounce-back week here in Week 8?
Yeah, what do they call those get-right games? They got that. And the opponent was, you're right, just perfect for them. You look at the Baltimore Ravens, one of the best rushing teams in the NFL, you know, besides their quarterback Lamar Jackson. And there is a lot of sense that the types of teams that the Lions have struggled against defensively have been teams with mobile quarterbacks. Well, they don't come any less mobile than Jimmy G, as we saw tonight. The Raiders, despite having Josh Jacobs and paying him this offseason, I mean, he hasn't even had a game where he's rushed for 80 yards this season. They have one of the lowest yards per carry in the National Football League. And you know, once they were, you could see that the Raiders knew they weren't going to win this game throwing it. So they were really trying to establish Jacobs right into the teeth of that Lions defense. And for one drive, they managed to do it. I mean, their only touchdown drive was basically, you know, breaking off 5, 6, 7 yards with Josh Jacobs down the length of the field. But they weren't able to sustain that. And once the Lions knew, you know, once the scoreboard and the clock started to work against the Raiders, you saw what the Lions could do when they knew they were facing a one-dimensional offense. I mean, you mentioned 6 sacks on the night. 3 of those came, you know, in one series. When the Lions when the Raiders were trying to work deep out of their own end, you know, they got a roughing the passer penalty to extend a drive, and then you just saw the Lions defense, you know, pin their ears back, and it was 3 sacks on 4 plays, and no hope for the Raiders. So the Detroit Lions, look, it would have been a shocker, and there would have been a lot of questions asked if this game had gone the other way. On the scoreboard, it looks respectable, but between the drives that ended in field goals, the pick 6 that the Lions gave away, that made it a lot closer, but really, this was for all intents and purposes a blowout.
People used to complain when the Lions played on primetime. Hey, guess what? The Lions have won 4 straight games in primetime. That's the most they've won in primetime since the 1970 merger. These are the primetime Lions now. Dave Naylor, you're always good in primetime. Thanks for this. Get home. Get some rest, okay?
Thanks, Jay. I will do.
All right. Hey, as I said, Lions have won 4 straight primetime games. And they ended the Packers' playoff chances in the last game of the year last season. Look, they like playing in prime time now. That's what they are. That's who this team is. And now they even get a bye, which is a terrific thing if you're the Detroit Lions.